At the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the US had a total of 7 fleet carriers, of which 3 were in the Pacific Theater. Admiral Yamamoto had hoped to destroy US carriers at Pearl Harbor, but none were to be found. While Yamamoto lamented about not destroying any US carriers, the US began to mobilize its carriers into task forces, ready to strike back at the Japanese. This episode will be on the early American carrier raids of the Pacific. In any competition, information about the state of play is key, as true for warfare as it is for business, which is why you can get the upper hand in the business world with our sponsor Trends. It's a networking hub and knowledge base for entrepreneurs that provides a load of different services. They analyze market trends to detect the next big thing before anyone else, and each week they report to Trends subscribers to let them get in early. They also write articles on emerging markets, business best practices and success stories to emulate, and have a massive vault of advice and intel to browse, from productivity tips to full-on ready-to-start business plans. They host weekly events such as live business training and community mixers, and said community is always there to discuss plans and collaborate on new entrepreneurial ventures, whether it's mentors, partners or investors you'll need. And being around like-minded people brings invaluable conversations and connections that drives everyone forward. Reach your full potential and surround yourself with the best of the best by entering the Trends community via our exclusive offer. Go to trends.co/kingsandgenerals and you'll get a 7-day trial for just $1. That's trends.co/kingsandgenerals. Fate played a pivotal role for the USS Enterprise as she narrowly missed being caught at Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7, 1941. She was, however, immediately brought to the front lines as she had sent out 18 Dauntless at dawn to scout the area and land at Ford Island. These aircraft were caught between the attacking Japanese aircraft and anti-aircraft fire from the ships and shore installations at Pearl Harbor. 7 Dauntless were shot down by the Japanese and friendly fire. When Enterprise received radio messages of the attack, she made the decision to launch an airstrike at 1700 hours, consisting of 6 Wildcat fighters, 18 Devastator torpedo bombers, and 6 Dauntless bombers. Unfortunately, they failed to find any targets and were diverted to Hickam Field on Oahu. On top of not finding any targets, upon entering the night sky of Oahu, the Wildcats triggered panic fire and 3 of them were shot down, killing their pilots, while a 4th aircraft ran out of fuel and was ditched. A rough start for the Americans. One of the first carrier operations would be the relief of Wake Island, which the Japanese began to attack on December 8th. Admiral Fletcher's Task Force 14, centered around Saratoga, was sent to relieve Wake Island, while Admiral Wilson Brown's Task Force 11, centered around Lexington, would undertake a raid on the island of Jaluit in the Marshall Islands as a diversion. However, while en route to Wake Island, at 9 PM on December 22nd, the US received information indicating the presence of 2 IJN carriers and 2 battleships near Wake Island, forcing Vice Admiral William S. Pye to cancel the relief and redirect Task Forces 14 and 11 back to Pearl Harbor, another tough break for the Americans. In the Atlantic, Yorktown and Hornet departed from Norfolk for the Pacific via the Panama Canal. Yorktown departed on December 16th, reaching San Diego on December 30th, and became the flagship for Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher's newly formed Task Force 17. Hornet was on a training mission just out of Norfolk, and to the surprise of her crew, was experimenting by launching B-25 Mitchell medium bombers from her deck. Her crew did not know the meaning of the experiment, and she would depart from Norfolk later on March 4th en route for the Pacific. Task Force 14 replaced Admiral Fletcher for Rear Admiral Herbert F. Leary, and were sent to patrol the vicinity of Midway on December 31st, 1941. Admiral Fletcher took Task Force 17 and escorted convoys carrying Marines to reinforce American Samoa, departing on January 6th. Task Force 11, commanded by Vice Admiral Wilson Brown, set off to patrol in the direction of Johnson Atoll. Task Force 8, commanded by Vice Admiral William Halsey Jr., was sent to protect convoys reinforcing American Samoa on January 11th. After patrolling and assisting convoys out of Samoan waters, Task Force 8 and 17 were dispatched to raid the Marshall and Gilbert Islands. Task Force 17 would strike Jaluit, Mili and Makin, while Task Force 8 would strike Kwajalein, Watjer and Taroa. Task Force 17 was screened by only 2 cruisers, approaching their objectives in the pre-dawn darkness on February 1st. At 4:15 am, Yorktown launched 11 Devastators and 17 Dauntless to strike Jaluit, while 14 Dauntless set off for Mili and Makin. En route to Jaluit, they faced a fierce tropical thunderstorm, with many rain squalls making for poor visibility. The aircraft managed to attack a few Japanese shore installations and shipping, but 6 aircraft failed to return from the raid as a result of extreme weather. Simultaneously, 5 Yorktown aircraft attacked Makin Atoll, also under poor weather. They managed to destroy 2 large Kawanishi Mavis H-6K flying boats and severely damaged gunboat Nagata-Maru. The last aircraft attacked Mili Atoll, but the pilots found no real military targets. While searching for ditched aircraft returning from the Jaluit raid, Yorktown's destroyer escorts, which had broken off from the task force, were attacked by a Mavis flying boat and asked for her help. Yorktown launched 6 F-4F Wildcat fighters to intercept. Pilots E. Scott McCuskey and John P. Adams both closed in on the enemy aircraft, firing simultaneously, destroying it. Yorktown ended up losing 4 Devastators, 3 Dauntless, and 1 Seagull floatplane from Louisville. Task Force 8 had the more difficult mission, as it needed to neutralize a number of airfields to give itself the best chance of escaping without suffering enemy airstrikes. The issue Enterprise had was she lacked enough bombers to cover all of the targets, and thus she was forced to allocate 2 divisions of Wildcats with bombing missions. This meant that none of the Dauntless or Devastators would have escorts. On top of this, she would still not have enough bombers, and thus cruisers Salt Lake City and Northampton would bombard Watjer, while Chester would bombard Taroa. At 5 am, Enterprise launched its first wave to hit Kwajalein, consisting of 37 Dauntless and 9 Devastators, while 6 Wildcats went to Watjer and Tarao. As the force came over Kwajalein, the enemy began to launch A-5M Claude fighters. The Dauntless bombed the grounded aircraft, hangars and small buildings as Claudes intercepted them. 4 Dauntless were shot down, 2 by Claudes and 2 by anti-aircraft flak. Meanwhile, the 9 Devastators began to torpedo the ships moored in the anchorage. They destroyed mine layer Tokiwa, transports Bordeaux Maru, Yasukuni Maru, and hit the cruiser Katori as she tried to escape, doing serious damage. Simultaneously, the 5 Wildcats reached Watjer and Tarao, where they discovered several parked G-3M Nell bombers and Claudes launching to intercept them. 1 Claude was shot down as the Wildcats strafed and bombed the airfield. The Wildcats sent word to the Enterprise to send more bombers. Thus, 9 Devastators and 2 Dauntless squadrons followed up later, bombing the airfields. Despite the air attacks, it was not enough to neutralize the threat, and so Northampton and Salt Lake City began to bombard Watjer, while Chester and a pair of destroyers bombarded Taroa. Several Claudes tried desperately to attack the enemy, and one managed to drop a small bomb on Chester, forcing the task force to withdraw. Then, 8 G-3M Nells located Enterprise fleeing 100 miles away and raced to bomb her as she launched her 6 Wildcats to intercept. The Nells released their bombs, some as close as 30 yards away from the Enterprise, all missing. Enterprise's anti-aircraft fire and her Wildcats took down 1 Nell before they withdrew. 15 Japanese aircraft had been destroyed, with 3 IJN warships damaged, and light to moderate damage was done to the 3 islands' naval garrisons. Task Force 8 lost 5 Dauntless, 1 Wildcat and 1 floatplane from Salt Lake City. Following the Marshall and Gilbert raids, Task Force 8 was sent back to Pearl Harbor, where Enterprise was reassigned to Task Force 16. Task Force 16 was directed to depart on Valentine's Day of 1942 to raid Wake Island, which had been occupied by Japan since December 22nd. Task Force 16 arrived at the launch point on February 24th, preparing to launch aircraft before dawn. Enterprise launched 6 Wildcats, 36 Dauntless, and 9 Devastators, set to reach Wake in 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Northampton, Salt Lake City, Maury and Balch had detached from the task force to bombard Wake. Japanese air searchers detected the ships before they arrived, and 8 Nakajima E-8N Daves carrying small bombs attacked them, hitting no targets. The 4 US ships then began to bombard Peel Island as the US aircraft arrived. The Dauntless of VB-6 bombed a seaplane base, sinking 2 H-6K flying boats, hit a radio station and oil tanks. VS-6 and VT-6 together bombed Wake's airfield, hitting grounded aircraft and strafing gun positions. 1 Dauntless was hit by anti-aircraft fire and forced to ditch off the island's coast. Both pilots were taken prisoner. The 2 cruisers also launched their Curtiss SOC Seagull seaplanes, which dropped small 100-pound bombs on buildings on the northwest part of Wake. On their way out, the bombarding party shot at 2 patrol boats, with Balch managing to sink one. The following day, Task Force 16 were ordered to raid Marcus Island, situated 600 miles northwest of Wake. Task Force 16 proceeded to a point 175 miles northeast of Marcus, and Enterprise launched a strike group of 32 Dauntless with 6 Wildcats as escort. The strike force made it over the island while it was still dark, so several Dauntless dropped parachute flares, illuminating the island. The Dauntless of VB-6 quickly bombed the runways, air facilities and oil tanks. VS-6 followed this up by hitting a radio building under heavy anti-aircraft fire. It turned out there were no enemy aircraft, as the airfields were just under construction. 1 Dauntless was lit on fire from anti-aircraft fire and forced to ditch 10 miles off the coast. Both pilots were taken prisoner. The Japanese capture of Rabaul in early February threatened the crucial San Francisco-Australian sea lane supply line. Admiral Chester Nimitz devised a plan to solve the threat by sending Task Force 11 to raid Rabaul on February 21st. The raid called for an airstrike followed by a surface bombardment. As Task Force 11 approached Rabaul due east on the morning of February the 20th, they encountered an enemy patrol flying boat. At 10:15 AM, Lexington's radar picked up incoming aircraft, so Lexington launched a 6-plane patrol with 2 Wildcat fighters to intercept them. The patrol shot down 4 Kawanishi H-6K4 Mavis, but not before they had sent word back to Rabaul, prompting Vice Admiral Sugayoshi Inoue to order an airstrike from Rabaul accompanied by 4 cruisers against Task Force 11. 17 Bettys of the 4th Kokutai took off from the Vunakanor airfield en route to attack. Task Force 11 knew they had lost the chance to raid Rabaul and began to flee the area, when at 3:42 PM, their radar picked up incoming aircraft. Lexington launched 6 Wildcats to intercept, followed by 4 more, and held 6 in the air to defend her. 5 out of the first 9 Bettys to arrive were shot down, as the remaining 4 tried to bomb Lexington under heavy fire. Their bombs landed 3,000 yards short of the carrier, as 3 more Bettys were shot down at the cost of 2 Wildcats who received returning fire. The last Betty tried to escape, but a Dauntless pilot shot her down. The second formation of Bettys was detected by radar at 4:49 PM. With the majority of the Wildcats chasing the previous formation, only 2 Wildcats were available to confront this formation. The 2 Wildcats made a series of high-scale diving attacks on the Bettys V formation, managing to shoot down 3 Bettys and send 1 limping away. The remaining 4 Bettys dropped their bombs, missing Lexington by only 100 yards each. As the Bettys withdrew, only 2 would make it back home, as they had sustained heavy damage and had to ditch. The Japanese had lost 23 aircraft and 130 men at the cost of 2 Wildcats and a single pilot for Task Force 11. After the failed attempt at raiding Rabaul, Task Force 11 was redirected to join up with Task Force 16 north of New Caledonia on March 6th. The Japanese had left Rabaul to invade Papua New Guinea, anchoring most of their shipping off the villages of Lae and Salamua. Task Force 11 and 16 were ordered to raid Lae and Salamaua from the Gulf of Papua. This meant the two airstrikes would have to fly over the formidable Owen Stanley mountain range, which would allow the attackers to seemingly come out of nowhere. The two task forces sailed south of Port Moresby and launched 104 aircraft. Lexington was first launching at 7:49 AM, consisting of 8 Wildcats, 31 Dauntless and 13 Devastators. 20 minutes later, Yorktown launched 30 Dauntless, 12 Devastators and 10 Wildcats. Lexington's Wildcats arrived at Lae and Salamaua first, finding no airborne aircraft, so they dropped small 30-pound bombs on 2 airfields and strafed them. The bombers went to Huon Gulf to hit shipping, where they found 3 transports unloading off Lae, guarded by 2 destroyers. The Dauntless bombed them with several hits. 1 Dauntless was hit by anti-aircraft fire and crashed, killing the pilots. 2 Dauntless went after the cruiser Yubari, further out in the Gulf, hitting her and causing light damage. Next to be hit was the Mineslayer Suguru and transports China Maru and Yokohama Maru. The Devastators torpedoed the transports off Lae, but all missed, having run too deep and passing underneath their targets, while others ran erratically or failed to release from the aircraft. As Lexington's group departed, Yorktown's arrived. Her Devastators luckily were carrying bombs rather than torpedoes. Yorktown's Wildcats found no airborne opposition, so they began to strafe airfields at Salamaua. The Dauntless attacked Yubari, hitting her 3 times. Despite this, Yubari survived, limping back to Rabaul. Next, the Dauntless hit the 3 previously hit transports, adding further damage. The Devastators then spotted the seaplane tender Kiyokawa Maru, escorted by the destroyer Mochizuki, approaching from the north. The Devastators bombed the seaplane tender, scoring a hit from 13,000 feet, causing severe damage and destroying several float planes. Kiyokawa Maru survived, but was forced to return to Japan for extensive repairs. Both air groups returned over the Owen Stanley Mountain, losing only a single aircraft. Overall, they sunk 3 transports, injured several ships, and killed 130 Japanese. In late April, Task Force 18 and 16 would see one of the most incredible raids made during the war, the Doolittle Raid of April 18, 1942. Enterprise and Hornet would launch 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers to hit Tokyo, demonstrating that the Japanese mainland was vulnerable to American air attacks. This raid served as a retaliation for the attack on Pearl Harbor and a major psychological blow to Japan, as well as a boost to American morale. To learn more about this, please check out our upcoming episode on the Doolittle Raid. The American raids had a major psychological effect on the IJN. The IJN now believed the Americans were willing to risk their carriers to thwart further Japanese operations in the Pacific. Admiral Inoue, after the raid on Lae Salamaua, requested Japan's combined fleet to send carriers to provide air cover for an upcoming operation designated Operation Mo. Admiral Yamamoto obliged him by sending a force of 2 fleet carriers, a light carrier, a cruiser division, and 2 destroyer divisions. The IJN would not allow American carriers to raid so easily next time. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.